trade advisor and Trump confidant, Peter Navarro, has once again targeted India for its oil trade with Russia. Navarro alleged that India did not need Russian crude oil and that the imports were a refining, profiteering scheme and a laundromat for the Kremlin. Speaking to reporters, Navarro alleged that India had dramatically shifted its energy purchases since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine in Feb 2022.
India bought virtually no Russian oil. Let me say it again. Prior to the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, India bought virtually no Russian oil. I mean, it was like 1% of their needs. So the argument somehow now, as the percentage has gone up to like 30 and 35%, that somehow they need Russian oil to cool their homes or cook or drive their cars is nonsense. India doesn't appear to want to recognize its role in the bloodshed. It simply doesn't. It's cozying up the Xi Jinping. Is what it's doing. It's not act. And by the way, I wrote that article in the FT just to deal with the propaganda of the Indian government to make people want to feel sorry for them. Oh, they need the oil. They don't need the oil. It's a refining profiteering scheme. It's a laundromat for the Kremlin.
This is not the first time Navarro has made such a bizarre allegation. Earlier in the article for Financial Times, Navarro had called on India to stop buying Russian crude oil. New Delhi has immediately called out Navarro's litany of lies against India. External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar said the US itself had asked New Delhi to help stabilize global energy markets by buying Russian oil. Jaishankar said he was perplexed by the US tariff stand on India.
Well, I don't want to comment on a person, but let me comment on the subject. We are not the biggest purchasers of Russian oil, that is China. We are not the biggest purchasers of Russian LNG. I'm not sure, but I think that is the European Union. We are not the country which has the biggest trade surge with Russia after 2022. I think there are some countries to the south. We are a country where actually the Americans said for the last few years that we should do everything to stabilize the world energy markets, including buying oil from Russia. Incidentally, we also buy oil from America, and that amount has been increasing. So, quite honestly, we are very perplexed at the logic of the argument that you had referred to.
As Jaishankar pointed out, India isn't the biggest purchaser of Russian oil. It is China. Also, the biggest buyer of Russia's LNG is European Union. Now, let's look at some numbers. LNG, the share of EU is 51%. China, 21%. Japan, it is 18%. This is LNG. Let's take a quick look at the crude oil. China, 47%. India, 38%. EU, 6%. Turkey, 6%. Now, pipeline gas, all from Russia. EU, 37%. China, 30%. Turkey, 27%. So, this is what EU, China, Turkey and Americans, and I'll show you, are trading with Russians. Earlier, MEA spokesperson Randeep Jaiswal said targeting India is unjustified and unreasonable. He called out the nations criticizing India as Russia's biggest business partners. And he said, India's import will ensure affordable energy cost to the Indian consumer. He also said the very nations criticizing India are themselves indulging in trade with Russia. USA continues to import Russian uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry. USA imports Russian palladium for its EV industry, fertilizers and chemicals. EU had a bilateral trade of Euro 67.5 billion in goods with Russia in 2024. EU-Russia trade in services estimated at 17.2 billion in 2023. This is the fact of the matter. This is the fact of the matter. And more than that, the real money is being made by the European Union, the people who are actually benefiting are the Americans, they are the Chinese. And that's where the real money is. Like EU Russia trade includes fertilizers, chemicals, iron, and steel, and machinery and transport equipment. Now let's call out the Trump's hypocrisy in trade with Russia. The spike is clear. Since he took oath in January, US imports from Russia nearly doubled, jumping from 196 million to 405 million per month. In 2024, US total annual import from Russia were 3 billion. In first 6 months of 2025, US has already imported 2.5 billion worth of goods. And at this rate, last year US-Russia imports could double in 2025. So let me just introduce my guest, Professor Scott Lucas. He joins me from Dublin, Ambassador Deepak Vora and Dr. Rajan Kumar from JNU. So, Professor Lucas, why is Navarro attacking India again and again? Every 72 hours, he gives a press statement, sir. Is there a method to this madness?
Let me say, first of all, on the issue of India buying Russian oil, I understand why India buys Russian oil. It's getting a discount on Russian oil because of the international pressure, including sanctions on Russian oil. But as has been pointed out, it is doing so within the price cap set by the G7 countries. I personally would hope that India would look at other suppliers of oil, but that's because of my position on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we can discuss that later. Let me be clear about Peter Navarro. He is using the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a pretext simply to batter India in the way that he has battered China for years. That is because Peter Navarro is an economic protectionist. He's almost like a warrior protectionist. That is, the United States should not have to observe the rules of the international economy, the rules of international trade that we have had since the 1950s. The US should be able to just simply slap tariffs on countries and bully them. And as you know, of course, even before we talk about the India-Russia oil issue, the Trump administration had already slapped a 25% tariff on India and had effectively collapsed trade talks that India and the United States had had earlier this year. So no, this is another example of Peter Navarro being an economic bully. I went and checked just before I went on air with you. Before last month, I cannot find record of Peter Navarro commenting on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He just suddenly has developed this interest as a way to justify increasing the tariffs on India.
Absolutely. Dr. Rajan Kumar?
Yes.
You know, is it a sudden interest, or is it just a tactic for to create pressure on India so that some concessions on agriculture can be made, and not realizing the fact that there are certain national interests which cannot be compromised?
I think it's a cocktail of ignorance and arrogance. Americans, they are known for hypocrisy, and what you see is absolute hypocrisy here. And Navarro is not somebody who should be guiding India's policy. India should pursue a very independent policy and not come under pressure the way, for instance, Japan or even European Union came. And it's very sad, some of the countries like European Union, which could have registered the mercurial policies and the very arrogant policies of United States in terms of tariff, but with a population of roughly 450 billion and an economy of roughly 20 trillion economy, even European Union, if you see most of the leaders, the way they met and the way they were praising President Trump. So that shows, that's the kind of message that, the president is taking. He's taking that he understands that if Japan, if European Union, if these countries can be subordinated, then what is India? But he doesn't know that India doesn't. India has always pursued a very independent policy, even during the Cold War period when its economy was not very strong, when it was not a very powerful country the way it is today. So even during the Cold War period, it didn't follow the American diktats. So this is pure arrogance. This is pure hypocrisy, and I think this, as you rightly showed in your program just now, that how other countries are importing. But my logic is slightly different. That even if that logic that other countries are import, why do we have to go with other logic? We should simply say to the Americans that listen, this is not about just the trade. We didn't start the war. We don't want Ukraine and Russia to fight. NATO is responsible for the war which is happening, and so we are not responsible for that, and they should not be dictating us. First, they dictate us in the case of Iran, that we cannot import from Iran. Second, they are saying that we cannot import from Russia. So that is something which is unacceptable, because it's not going to stop here. Let me tell you, today they are talking about this what you call Russian oil. Tomorrow they'll talk about the defense.